Hello and welcome to Warblog. Today I'm going to play The Fall of the Barre regime. Or at least I'm going to talk about it. Might play a little bit. This is a game that just happens to sort of coincide with the development of irregular and insurgent units, and which is sort of convenient because this game, or this period, was essentially, well, mainly insurgent uprising. It's basically the Somali Civil War, and it's not so much it's intrigued me, it's the one that has intrigued me at this moment. Not so much at this moment as a first choice. I'm just intrigued by all strange conflicts post Second World War. I mean, I like all of them really, but I mean, so here we have the Somali Civil War, and you quite often hear the name. I hear it and don't know anything about it. And the thing with this period is that no one really seems to know much about it. You can't buy books on it. I've looked, and so I'm going to do other ones that are equally sort of interesting. But essentially, the Civil War sort of started in probably about 1980. Let's have a quick look at the. There's Major General Mohammed Sayed Barre, and so basically in 1986, Barre suffered serious injuries in an automobile accident near Mogadishu when the car that he was transporting him smashed into the back of a bus in a heavy rainstorm. He was basically treated in hospital. Although he recovered enough to present himself as a sole presidential candidate for re-election over a term of 7 years, on December 1986, his poor health and advanced age led to speculation about who would succeed him in power. I'll just read this, aren't I? Possible contenders included his son-in-law, etc., etc. In an effort to hold on to power, Barre's ruling Supreme Revolutionary Council became increasingly authoritarian and arbitrary. This caused opposition to his regime to grow. Barre in turn tried to quell the unrest by abandoning appeals to nationalism, relying more and more on his own inner circle and exploiting historical clan animosities. By the mid-1980s, more resistance movements supported by Ethiopia's communist Derg administration had sprung up across the country. Barre responded by ordering punitive measures. Gangsters he perceived as locally supporting the guerrillas, especially in the northern regions. So Mogadishu's down here, and the northern regions are sort of obviously over in the north. This is a particular place we're going to look at in a second, Hargeisa. So northern regions. The clampdown included bombings of cities within the northwestern administrative centres of Hargeisa, a Somali national movement stronghold. So basically in 1988 he started bombing this place here, and that was pretty much what set them off. And as you can see, well, you can't, it's not the old days. In 1990, as fighting intensified, Somali's first president, Aden Abdullah Osman Dar, and about 100 other Somali politicians signed a manifesto advocating reconciliation. A number of signatories were subsequently arrested. Barre's heavy-handed tactics further strengthened the appeal of various rebel movements, although these groups' only common goal was the overthrow of his regime. So there's a few things I just sort of like to maybe point out with regards to that. Is whenever people talk about Somalia, they talk about this sort of I don't know, post-apocalyptic wildland. Oh, no, maybe not that. Basically a completely lawless state, but it wasn't. I mean, until Barre had his accident and became a little authoritarian, it was actually what you might describe as a stable state. And so essentially what we're looking at here is the genesis of revolution. So in 1986 he basically had his accident, things went downhill, and insurgents grew up, and so bit by bit he basically alienated everyone against him. So all these blue units are the Somali Democratic Republic troops. They keep calling themselves Democratic Republic, but they didn't have elections. So, oops. Oh well, I'll leave that in, no biggie. By mid-1990, Somali United Somali Congress rebels had captured most towns and villages surrounding Mogadishu, which prompted some to give Barre the ironic title of Mayor of Mogadishu instead of President of Somalia, I guess. And in December, the USC entered Mogadishu. So basically, what this sort of scenario reflects is the final move militarily into Mogadishu. So I'm sort of thinking that, I mean, I was going to do it, but basically I haven't, and so that's just tough. But I was going to move the movements down to half, so these would be at 2 and these would be at 4, cutting them down by a third and allowing them to move around like that. I don't know what the scales are, but I'm sort of thinking, well, it might be 3 or 4 days a turn. It's very strategic. Now, I've not played it yet, and I've no idea how it's going to work out. The only thing that's sort of missing from the new developments is the irregulars' ability to attack with 5. So and that might be achieved. That isn't required in the hard coding of the game. But essentially, if this unit attacks this unit, they will attack with a strength of 5 because they're irregulars, and this is less than 5. So they can get to attack with a strength of 5, which is 5 to 1, which is a pretty good result. But they can't do that at the moment, so they're only attacking at 1 to 1s. So we've got some insurgents in here. I haven't actually included many insurgents yet, but insurgents are working, so they could actually start off by trying to bomb I don't know if anything's going to happen. I wonder why that's not working. That's strange. Okay, well that works. Back to game. I think I know why it is. It's the first turn. I always get this. Yeah. Basically, they can't do anything on the first turn because if you look there at the things, after move, 3, depression, dug, it doesn't say active. They're not active. When they go through a turn, they'll become active. I need to put something in to sort of prime them so they're active on the first turn. So there you go. Now, the interesting thing about this is that I sort of want to do. I did a video earlier. Now I want to do a video. I want to actually almost set this up exactly the same to cover what's happening now, but only use insurgent units because essentially Somalia is entering, another sort of breakdown of its state. And if you sort of look through one of the links I showed a while back on another video, there are quite a few bombs going off, and that's a more of an insurgent sort of thing than this is. If you look at this, you can actually see 3 abandoned Somali National Army M47 tanks destroyed. You know, the thing with this is that the state still existed and it had an army, and the rebels actually were probably in large parts part of that army and captured a lot of the hardware and used a lot of the hardware. And it was only after they, I mean, the revolution was actually supported by the West in so much, you know, more to the point that the Barre regime was basically lost a lot of support by the West because of, you know, bombing the cities and his harsh, you know, tactics to quell the rebels. And essentially, up until they actually take Mogadishu, you can almost see them getting a lot of international sympathy and being supported. It was only after they took Mogadishu that all these clans then started to break up. Now this is a map of after. This is from 1992, but all of these are, for example, there's the USC, the United Somali Congress, and a lot of these are actually on here, but not all of them. I mean, there's only 5, and here there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's an extra. There's 10 here. So there's an extra 5 sort of armed faction that's not included in this initial thing. So, for example, here's the SDF, and they do actually roughly correlate to where they were here. Now, I don't know where the SDF were, but they sound a bit like the SNF, so I'll put them there. There's the SSDF there, no jokes. So SSDF, SSDF. So I've tried to sort of put them where they were relatively there in you know, in 1992. Although this is 1990, so it's not quite the same. And again, SPM down here, SPM there. So essentially, what happens is, and I've not played it yet, and to be quite honest, I don't really feel like just jumping in when I'm doing a video and I've only got 3 minutes left. I think there's, you know, just looking at it, there's a lot to sort of see and think about. So essentially, what the gameplay will be are everyone against the solid blue units. So these are rebels, and there's a large trail of reinforcements that pop up. Now I don't know what the I really don't know what the sort of the game balance is. I mean, when you look at something like this, I mean, it's only a weak regiment relatively in comparison to other games, but compared to everything else, you know, this is like a titan. You know, how can they possibly beat this armored unit? And they've only got a few armored units, and I have sort of included them, you know, because you can see them there, and obviously they were an army. They were, you know, a state with a significant, well, reasonable enough army. Interestingly enough, there is, I haven't got it open, but if you start Googling for the Somali War, there are a hell of a, well, basically there's a few reports talking about, you know, the state of health and medical aid and food and water supply, sanitation in, you know, places like Mogadishu, for example. And in that list, there's not a lot of military insight, but there is a list of all the heavy artillery that they had, and there was just absolutely tons of it, and a lot of it was actually manned by children. Now I've not put in the same sort of amount of artillery, but some of it was sort of, well, some of it was really complicated American style artillery. It needed 17 crew members, and they didn't have it. They were armed by children who didn't even know how to use them. And some of these things were you know, children ended up in charge of these artillery pieces that could fire shells 30 kilometers. When you start thinking about that, it's sort of like, well, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a strange. So they weren't sort of completely. There weren't sort of rebels that just had just AK-47s. They managed to take a lot of the, you know, the state hardware, and that's one of the things I think is interesting about, you know, this sort of style of scenario, is that once a state fails, the hardware that it has comes into, you know, is controlled by the people or the rebels, or, you know, whoever's left, and that's actually, you know, quite dangerous if you've got a lot of guns. Anyway, it's coming up to 15 minutes. I'm not sure whether I'm going to do another one. I might. Okay, I'm back. And I can't remember what I was talking about. Oh yeah, I was saying that basically, it's amazing I remember. It's saying that basically, well, what I was saying was that it's a state that had a military sort of machine, and because it broke down the state in civil war, all those items that were sort of kept safe and secure, I mean, it's all obvious really, but were suddenly possessed by children. In fact, I was just reading today about, I won't go into detail, but how in the Second World War, children in England, there was a problem, because children had guns. They were getting them, people were bringing them back from the war, and the kids would hang around in the streets. They were saying it's one thing having a bunch of troublemakers hanging around in the streets. It's a bit different when they're armed. And anyway, so these kids in Mogadishu have high-powered artillery pieces that can fire 30 kilometers, and yeah, so that's what happens. So I mean, it can happen in other African states, but it could sort of almost happen in places like Russia as the Soviets fell, and Ukraine, and and in theory it could happen anywhere, but it's less likely to happen in more advanced states. But why, I don't know. I mean, it's the risk, and so this is a good example of that. Anyway, I'm actually going to maybe play a few turns, but I don't know what. So I haven't really thought about it. I must admit I'm very happy with the look of this game. I want to get through a few turns because I want to see how the reinforcements sort of come in. So essentially, I'm going to maybe add a little narrative to it as I go along, because it's how I like to sort of play it. I mean, essentially, this place up here, Hargeisa, is the sort of the capital of the United Somali Congress, USC. So I guess that they might attack this place first. Now I'm not going to use the insurgent unit because they really shouldn't be firing. So I'm going to have to try and figure out how to stop them getting involved in combat, because they shouldn't really be in there. The irregulars, although they won't be up to 5, they can still engage, because they are actually just like a company. They're just called irregulars. So anyway, so I'll press the attack button. It should be a 3-to-1. Oh, look at that! 3-to-1 with a roll of 1 gets a defender eliminated, and defender eliminated works. That's nice. So that was interesting, because in this sort of game, it's given the rebels what they need, really, because if they start failing, the whole momentum of the civil war might never have happened. So it's quite convenient, because that victory essentially could be defined or described as what gave the rebels the sort of the initiative to actually sort of start going from an insurgent based, which are these units, war, insurgent based resistance through to a full on military resistance, developing their irregulars. So what we got on here, there are only irregulars. So what I'm sort of thinking is that we've gone through the insurgent stage, where we've now got people instead of sort of like disguised as shepherds and striking when they can't lose, and putting making car bombs, IEDs on the side of roads, landmines. Well, not landmines, but that's that sort of activity. They're now coming out of the closet, so to speak, and now are forming small groups, irregulars, and in this instance, they've won. That's interesting. Can't move in there. These ones should be able to on the road. Yep. They used 2 of their movement in that battle. So anyway, we've now taken that, and we actually have a front line now across here, although we're not particularly well reinforced. And in theory, they'll be able to come in through here, which is interesting. Okay, so we've done that there. So where else have we got units? This is what I'm maybe trying to sort of take you through on this journey to sort of, and also to think in my own mind. So we've basically got the Somali Salvation Democratic Front here with their sort of mass of troops. Now they don't want to go anywhere near. The Somali Democratic Republic have 4. Well, they have 5, but they have 4 garrisons around the country. Now, there's no historic precedent for that. I've just done it. So there's one there where they basically got an infantry company and something else. So here they've got an infantry company motorized, infantry company and artillery, infantry company and armor, and infantry company and mechanized infantry. In Mogadishu, they've obviously got their motorized regiment and their motorized armor. But everywhere else, it's just garrisoned with companies. So what the rebels are probably going to be looking out for is this garrison, as I might call it. Although I shouldn't really say it's a garrison because it's not really. There was no official precedent for it being there, and maybe they should be more down here. Because this is going to be possibly a threat over here. The rebels are not strong. I mean, they're not even strong against these singular units. So the question is, what will the USC, the SDR, the Somali Democratic Republic, what will the Somali Democratic Republic do? Well, I don't want to sit here. This is why I don't really want to sort of get into the planes game too heavily, because I don't want to start sort of sitting here thinking, oh, they'll do this, or, like I would if I was playing it, because otherwise I wouldn't get anywhere. I probably won't get anywhere anyway. But I think there's a lot of thinking to do with based around the strategies. But based on the first turn, I mean, I don't see any easy hits. I mean, there's rebels here, and they really can't do anything. So now, the thing to bear in mind is that when these irregulars are fully functioning, they will attack at 5-1. So they will be actually quite effective. But for the time being, I think I'm going to position them. Well, I think I'm actually going to attack here. No. Backed again. Well, I wanted to attack here because I want to stop him moving in this direction. He might retreat in that direction. Now this is going to be a 1-to-1 attack. Yep, I was going to say, I imagine. But the attacker retreated on that. So that was a failed attack by the rebels. Now I'm just doing these 1-to-1s because that's sort of the nature of this game. Now, at the moment, they've got 2 depressions, so that was a loss, which sort of balances out the victory over here. I'm still worried that the Somali Democratic Republic will be able to get into Hargeisa, because it's only got insurgents in there. They will just run away. That was a mistake. So anyway, here, well, I think I'm going to maybe try and at least maybe join my forces here. So I need 2 victories, and they're just 50. So that was an exchange. However, now I'm thinking here, There's sort of slight oversight. The game's still sort of under development, and these irregulars, they should have, they're being treated like insurgents in this instance. They should have lost some movement on that. They haven't. These have been depressed, but these haven't been depressed. They should be, so I'm going to have to fix that. I'm not going to attack again because I'm going to assume that they lost their movement on that. So that's an error with the current development in the programming. Again, they shouldn't have any movement left, but they've got movement and they've got all their depressions. See, they've got full movement and no depression on after that, so they should be at 0 movement and with 1 depression because they are regular troops. That's interesting how that sort of worked. Anyway, I will sort that out. I don't think anyone's really going to be noticing too much. So we've failed really. Here we had 2 exchanges, and we've sort of failed here. So this sort of northeastern part of Somalia hasn't really gone very well, and I think just playing that, it's just I'm really getting a feel that I don't remember anything. The Somali Democratic Republic is pretty strong, especially at this stage. I mean, this is just with the single companies. I mean, they haven't even got their hardware out yet. Now, in the middle area, we really don't have anything. So maybe I should put something in there. So really, we've got these sort of this area here, and that's about that. That's about it. Now, what I can do down here so they can only move 1 hex at a time, which is fine by me. So I'm going to go for another crap shot here. And that was an attack of retreat. It's a depression 2 with 0 movement, which is correct. He hasn't got any movement left to get near that unit. So the rebels, after a flying start, are now sort of faltering. Now this should be a 2-to-1, so we should have a little more luck here, plus the surround, but it won't have much effect. Defender retreats. Yep, that's all correct. And so, boosted with some more good news, the rebels, movement left, so not a terrible first move, and it's a sort of game where I sort of think, well, obviously I have to sort out the things with the exchanges on the irregular assaults, but sort of think, well, how does this work? You know, the first turn. I mean, that was more of a sure thing because we had 3 units going against it. Down here we had 2 units, so we've taken 2 cities, so that constitutes the start of the revolution. I think, you know, the headlines would read, you know, something along the lines of, you know, rebels capture strategic towns of Jamain and Barre, etc., etc., following, you know, harsh authoritarian, you know, actions by the Barre regime, you know, and then sort of considering all the implications of all of that. So that's the sort of first, you know, the first period. I'm running out to another 15 minutes, so I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not sure whether I'm going to do much more, but yeah.